Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film Kung Fu Panda 3. When you're telling any story about a hero or someone becoming a hero, it's always a little hard to make a sequel to that, because in the first film, it's almost like they've kind of completed their journey. They're unlikely to become a hero, you never think they can really do it, and they overcome odds and have this amazing arc, and it feels like, honestly, their story is almost over. But that's one of the things that's so great about the Kung Fu Panda franchise, is that Po always has room to improve and learn more things, and you can understand why he would have to learn other things, because you know as much kung fu as Po's gonna learn, he's still Po, he still screws up, he still might not make the jump and bounce around on his belly. We can all relate to that. We feel like we've mastered anything, but we just can't completely get it right. He's a very good protagonist. At the end of the first film, I was almost not sure how they could continue the story, but with the second film, they found a way to still have him learning a different thing. He has to find his inner peace. That continues what we liked about the first film, which was him learning kung fu, him becoming a different person, him having an arc. And unlike other films like 2, I thought of when I was thinking about this kind of hero arc that's perfect in the first film and how the sequels don't really work, was like the first Iron Man compared to Iron Man 2 and 3, and the first RoboCop compared to RoboCop 2 or 3. Now RoboCop, those sequels are awful, and Iron Man 2 or 3, I mean, I don't hate 3, but they're nowhere near as good as the first one, because they didn't really show what we liked about that Tony Stark character in the first film, which was spending time with him, watching him grow and learning things about him. And it didn't really work as well as Kung Fu Panda 2 did it, which is learning things about where he came from, who his parents really were, what exactly happened to him, how he got adopted, and it showed a real arc to him. And I think that's what's so strong about these films, is you see him keep evolving. That's why we liked the first Kung Fu Panda movie. That's why we had an attachment to them as an audience. It almost doesn't fall into excess and action sequences, even though it does, but it doesn't just fall into that. It understands the character as well. Kung Fu Panda 3 does that, but almost does it and continues the tradition that was set up in 2. It's like a more direct sequel to the second one, because instead of inner peace, he needs to find his chi, which feels a little familiar. And also that you're meeting all these pandas, but it didn't feel like it was expanding upon Po as a character. It almost felt like we were kind of going into something we had already done in 2, but further, and it didn't feel as original. It almost felt like they came up with the perfect way to have a sequel to that kind of story, but they almost kind of ran out of ideas for the third one, but they still get it to work. I still think this is an enjoyable movie, but it doesn't feel like that arc is evolving the way they did it so perfectly in the second one. In the third one, it feels like that out of gas mode that we all kind of thought the sequels to this film would actually be, rather than the potential that we saw in the second one. An evil yak chai master called Kai, voiced by J.K. Simmons, or at least in America, he's taken the cheese of all these great kung fu masters, and he's come to take all the kung fu masters in China, and he's come back to the human world, or the mortal realm, I guess, to steal all the chi of the kung fu masters at the time, and Po has to stop him, but Po has finally met his father, voiced by Bryan Cranston, called Li Shan. So his father comes to town looking for Po because he had a spiritual message from the universe, or so we saw at the end of Kung Fu Panda 2, and so he has come to bring Po back to the Panda Village, which they set up after the raid in the second one. If you saw this, you really need to have seen the second one to understand a lot of this movie, or at least the setup. Po needs to destroy Kai after Kai sends his like green Jade Stone warrior people after Po, and Lee sees all this and is frightened by it. He wants to take Po back to the village and tells him that the pandas can show him how to get his chi and defeat Kai. So Po goes to the Panda Village and starts to learn what it's like to be a panda, and hopefully eventually stop Kai before he takes over China and takes away all of the Kung Fu masters. One of the things I really like about DreamWorks is the lighting in their films is always gorgeous. It's almost very trying to be natural light kind of lighting. If you look at How to Train Your Dragon 2, or even the second Kung Fu Panda movie, and it's one of the best things I think DreamWorks has to offer. It shows how great their studio can be. In this film, they do the lighting a lot differently. There's scenes in the Panda Village where in Po's training all the pandas to fight Kung Fu, where it almost takes on a surreal quality, where the whole frame is draped in purple or orange. It felt almost like a surreal Asian film. I really like that about this film, and I like that they continue this like fine craftsmanship to their animation. Oftentimes DreamWorks doesn't get remembered for their better films. They almost get remembered for like Home and Shrek and stuff. When they have these kind of comedy action adventure films, the studio really shines, especially on a production production end, and it really makes it so I always want to see these films on the biggest screen possible because they're just awe-inspiring and beautiful. But you can tell these people have learned from both animation and live action cinematography, and they get this interesting, beautiful marriage between the two, and you get these really beautiful, gorgeous looking epic movies. And the backgrounds in Kung Fu Panda films have always been beautiful, and this film is no exception to that. It really continues and carries on the tradition. However, the one thing that's interesting about this movie is even though this film was a co-production between DreamWorks Animation and Oriental DreamWorks, the DreamWorks studio in China, which was mostly there so they could release this film in China and not have it considered an import, and if you know about the Chinese box office, there's a bunch of legal money stuff. But anyway, you'd think because they were doing that, this film would be more expensive and be even more expensive than the second one, but it's not. It's actually, on Wikipedia and everything I saw, says between 120 to 140 million, and the last one cost about 150 million. This film often doesn't get into the excess of the action sequences of the second one, which those action sequences were very beautiful and had a real kinetic energy to them. They were awesome. It made me go like, holy shit, like I don't like this story as much as the first one, but it's so visually stunning. Really, the second one, technical wise, is the better film. Writing wise in the actual movie, maybe not, but it makes a very worthy sequel. And the third one, they don't really have these excessive, amazing action sequences when these kind of jade soldiers come and attack them. It doesn't really do that the way they did it in the second one. And I felt disappointed by that, especially because this is the same director, Jennifer Yee Nelson. Let's say Jennifer Nelson. Okay, I can't pronounce things. I'm sorry. But Jennifer Nelson, who directed the second Kung Fu Panda film, and actually Kung Fu Panda 2 is the most financially successful film directed by a woman. This time she co-directed this film with Alessandro Carlani. I'm not exactly sure why they co-directed it because the last one was just amazing to look at. I don't think the excessive action sequences that she brought to the second one would necessarily work in this one. You couldn't really have as many, certainly. That was more of a battle film. That was more of a war movie. In this one, couldn't probably do as many, maybe have one or two, but I kind of missed them. It almost felt like it was visually scaled back, like it was doing more of what the first film did in a little way, which this film may have cost less than that. It's very unclear. The reason I bring that up is it feels like it's odd to have the third one cost so much less. The last one actually did just a little better. It's kind of odd for me to see a third movie kind of scale back in a way, and certainly the story they were telling, you couldn't have done those excessive action sequences, but it did feel like a little bit of it not progressing in the right way, which is kind of the same for the story itself. It's like, yeah, I get the chi thing and you're trying to do a different conflict, but it didn't feel that different, and they had all this time and they kind of present a movie that's similar to 2. It's like, how many times are we going to go into his backstory? I understand we want to find out more about him as a character, and that's why the first one worked, but it just felt like there maybe should have been a different thing about him evolving other than going into his past again. Clearly we had to do that because of the end of the second film, but it didn't feel as unique, really, and it didn't feel as surprising. Poe is still a great protagonist, and Poe definitely makes these movies work as well as he does. Without him, I don't think these movies would be as good as with the How to Train Your Dragon films. If you didn't have Toothless and Hiccup, I don't think they'd be as good either. They have some real amazing protagonists, and the interesting thing about Kung Fu Panda movies is it's like a really great kind of standard action adventure type of structure, but then they put in a bunch of dumb jokes and you almost don't notice it. But if this was just a straight action adventure film, especially the first two, you would be wowed and amazed by it. You'd be like, oh my god, I never see action adventure films like that anymore. And the third one didn't really feel like that. I mean, certainly like training a village and defending them and stuff is certainly something that's been going on, you know, in Seven Samurai and such, but it didn't feel really as inspired and as into that, and I think the writing definitely suffered in my mind. I like that it's about Poe and his journey, but I didn't feel like his journey was as interesting and inviting. But I still like that he still screws up, that he's still fallible, that you understand he can never be like these other kung fu masters, so he almost feels like he keeps having to grow and learn, and you get to go with him on that journey. This film, like, he learned about pandas and such, but the basic little structure of it, the basic idea of it and concept weren't really as interesting, and a lot of this film just kept reminding me constantly of the second one, and not because I had recently seen it, but because it shared so many plot elements with it. Recently, in re-evaluating the series, was like, wow, this is a really good franchise. I don't think people give Kung Fu Panda the credit it actually deserves. DreamWorks has made two really good action-adventure kind of fun family franchises with How to Train Your Dragon and Kung Fu Panda. This film doesn't feel like it fulfills on promise. It gets a little too jokey and kind of the stupid jokes you expect from DreamWorks. I still really enjoyed this film. I still had a good time. I still thought it was a good little adventure movie, Kung Fu Panda or not. When I rewatched them and really sat down with them, and even when I saw the first one initially, I was surprised by it. I was like, wow, this is like, I can't believe this is that good. And when I got to the third one, it was like, it feels kind of standard Kung Fu Panda. It doesn't feel like they're wanting to surprise me as much. I don't know what exactly happened in the production and why it feels almost scaled back in comparison to the second one. It's not that it was scaled back that I didn't like it. It was just kind of odd to do that as a follow-up, and there didn't seem to be much of a reason other than like, you know, maybe we should make this a little cheaper or something. The Kung Fu Panda movies are a very good franchise. In fact, I think if you're going to talk about DreamWorks franchises, it's kind of this and How to Train Your Dragon and then everything else, at least in my mind. This keeps fulfilling on it, and even though it's not as great as the other two, it still does some kind of interesting things. I really love the lighting. I love how the light draped everything in color in those sequences. I like some of the action sequences, and I like the spirit realm quite a bit, and I still was really into it and had a good time at the movies. So the high bar of 1 and 2 demotes this movie quite a bit, but if you leave this movie on its own, it's a fun kids action adventure kung fu movie, and you're going to have a decent enough time, but I don't think it's going to wow you. You're not going to be like, oh no, let me tell you about Kung Fu Panda. And that's how I felt after the first two. This is like, you know, it was a Kung Fu Panda, and that was all. So if you have seen Kung Fu Panda 3 and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.